we thought we will do today is take a look at the differences between doing a type of profile for children and adolescents that we have been looking up to this point. Though, as I told you, the profile really lends itself to any age group. You just have to make the necessary modifications. But if you are not reasonably well versed on this, it may be a little difficult to, if you are beginning in this, to really describe or decide what are the modifications that you have to make. So I'm going to give you some examples of it, so that you see what kind of differences there are to be assessed between children, adolescents, and adults. And one of the important points, perhaps one of the most important points, incidentally, all of this, the one I'm going to read to you today, not read it, but to go through it, is in the Psychoanalytic Study of the Child, volume 20, I believe. And it's quite old. So it's 35 years old, but I just read it. It's as good today as it was the day it was written. It's remarkable how updated they have remained. But the whole paper is on the adult profile. It's called Metapsychological Assessment of the Adult Personality, the adult profile. The other one was the diagnostic profile, mostly written for children and adolescents, as you know. So this one is in, and it has a good, very good clinical example of a patient that, in fact, was a patient of mine many years ago in London. And it was in London there was we used to have a meeting every week of something called the Freud Centenary Fund. The Freud Centenary Fund was a charitable organization where people could donate money. It was like a non-profit thing, like we are here. Only that it had an international scope, and it did promote, in a way we're trying to do here, the development of psychoanalysis. The difference was that it did something like, it took the senior analyst in London from the British Psychoanalytic Society, and particularly from the Hampstead Clinic. And people took turns in presenting cases to Anna Freud or Willy Hoffer or somebody like that, a very, very distinguished and experienced person. You have to remember, I was then, 30 years old, I guess. And that was an incredible opportunity for the development of the younger generation of analysts. In a way, it's similar, obviously not identical to what we are trying to do here. And so this case was presented to the Freud Centenary Fund for many, many, many weeks. It was like having, like you have here, a meeting today with Dr. Schneider, and you discuss the case with him. That's the way it was done over there. So there is an example in this paper, if you read it. I think the volume is upstairs, of a man in his 40s, married with children. In fact, you remember that I told you about simultaneous analysis at the clinic, and the father came into treatment at the recommendation of the therapist of the child, the daughter who was in analysis, and thought that it would be wise to have this man in treatment. And so the Freud Centenary Fund then promoted this activity, and I became his analyst. And so it was kind of a simultaneous analysis, which, as you know, were very interesting. In any case, this profile, this and perhaps this is a better way of describing the metapsychological assessment of the personality, whether it is an adult, a child, or an adolescent. Because as you remember, when we talk about this, we said this is a way of thinking. It's not a form to fill in information. It's a form that is built in such a way to teach you to think how to organize that material and what you need to look at and how you need to make it more and more complex. We have referred to that now many times, but I want that to be well settled in your heads, because if you use it in another way, you are wasting your time. It's not worth it. In any case, it became so valuable and made such a difference in terms of the assessment of people. This didn't come out of the blue. It came out of the fact that in London we had the type of diagnostic interviews that people have anywhere else, where a group of people will say the social worker read the history, the psychiatrist give his part of the examination, and then people had a discussion about it. Obviously, because we took a lot of these people into psychotherapy and analytic treatment. I shouldn't say psychotherapy, analytic treatment. That's essentially what the clinic did. Then we found that was very deficient as we got to know the patient. That in fact, we have missed an enormous amount of important things, and that in fact, many aspects of the personality of the patient that it would have been wise to take a good look at before you took these people into treatment was being ignored. And let me tell you that the Hampshire Clinic was, and I think probably still is, but in those days, was probably the best place you could go for any of this activity anywhere in the world. And yet we all felt that the usual procedures don't help. The usual diagnostic procedure, and the reason for that is very simple. Usually there might be in the meeting 2 or 3 what we used to call strong characters, or big mouses, which means they control the group. They don't necessarily know what they are saying, but they control the group. And that was a problem, though obviously in a meeting of highly educated and distinguished people, they could be put in their places reasonably well and reasonably easy, but you'd be surprised. That doesn't mean to say the next time they will do the same. The problem with that was essentially that a meeting lasts an hour and a half. And if they consume, you have a couple of them, and they consume 10-15 minutes, they were reducing the amount of time to have an intelligent discussion on the patient. And that was mostly the problem of the damage that people like that may do. The other thing was that in every group, all of us have kind of holy horses. In other words, we have developed certain preference in the way we look at things, in the way we understand things, and there is nothing to correct that in your head. That's whichever way you go to that, that's what you think. And that's what you will throw out at everybody. In fact, I have to tell you, the other day, we were looking, and Francis gave me some of the journal of the clinic, because they have some discussions of profile there, and we thought maybe we can use that data better than data from here, because the patients are here and so on. And I was looking at this discussion. This is at least 12 years after I left the clinic. And some of the same characters were there. They were saying exactly the same things, which was remarkable, as far as I was concerned, which goes to show that some of us never change, no matter what is done. We discarded that, but you could see that tendency. And obviously, so you need, in a group like that, if you're going to have a group like that, you need somebody to run it that is impartial, that is objective, that will give a chance to everybody, but will cut short the chaffs and then go for the wheat, you know what I mean? And that's not easy to find, because people's character tend to be, don't make waves, you know. And in any case, there were a lot of things. The other thing, because we have hobby horses, as we were saying, and that's why I mentioned the discussion afterwards, that they were have been publishing about the profiles in London. The people that I knew had certain hobby horses were there still riding the hobby horses. These, I have to say, were perhaps not the... These were visitors. The clinic always had visitors and treating them well. So you had to live with them or tell them, look, that's the door, don't come back, and we never did that. And obviously, after I left, well, I have to tell you, when I was there, I was very tempted to do just that. In any case, when people have hobby horses, all the cases go to the hobby horse. And if they happen to belong to the group of the powerful big mouses, the whole damn discussion goes in there, because then the other more reasonable people is discussing against that point of view. And the patient assessment got lost in that procedure. You understand what I mean? In an hour and a half, the thing is gone, and most of what is essential to the patient was lost. Now, we knew that. We knew that happened in all places, because we all sat in many places, be that at the institute, the clinic, other clinics that were around London and so on. And so one of Miss Freud's idea, who was the person that originally conceived the profiles, in its essence, was to create an instrument that will break away from that kind of tradition of diagnostic discussions, and to do it in the way that really well-trained and analysts that are seasoned and mature do it and think, and how they build the case and look at the whole case rather than an aspect of the case, but take like a bird's eye view of the land, so you see everything, where every tree is, where every house is, and so on, right? And say, oh, there is a palm tree there, I like palm trees, that's because of palm trees. And she came with the basic structure of it. This particular one may be of interest to you, the metapsychological assessment of the adult personality, the adult profile, was written by Anna Freud, by me, and by Ernest Freud, which is still alive, though he's quite old. I saw a picture of him the other day, and he's pretty old now. He must be approaching 90 or 90-some years of age. In any case, because that new approach proved to be so profitable and essentially did a number of things. It stopped the biases of the diagnostic discussion, because it forced you to look at every aspect of the personality. You couldn't go there with your hobby horse riding it an hour. You had to go there with that bears view of the patient, and that includes not only the conflicts of the patient, but the assets of the patient, and not only the id aspects of the patient, but the ego aspects of the patient, and the quality of their object relationships, and all of that. So it quickly conveyed to us that that was a much better way of presenting a case, organizing the material, and discussing it, and understanding that what we have been doing traditional like anybody else. So it took off like a rocket, it really did. It did something else, which was in a way unexpected, and that was that the students very quickly progressed in their ability to organize clinical data into theoretical concepts. They could retranslate what they saw. It then not only retranslated, you need to, if you want to retranslate, you have to speak the language of what you see, which is a clinical language. And then if you want to retranslate it into theoretical proposition, you have to have that knowledge too. and move comfortable between them. Well, that's exactly what the profile did. And I think I told you that many years later, I used to come to the States when I was there in London once a year to lecture in different universities and institutes and things of that kind. And everybody always asked me the same question. How come that all of you people that come from London are so comfortable? You hear a case once and you can put it in a theoretical frame. Here it takes a lot of time. How can you do that? I said, well, we were trained that way. We were trained to think like analysts. And the instrument that does it is the profile. If you do this consistently, you become very comfortable in doing that. And, you know, remember what it says it is. It's a metapsychological assessment. You are looking not only at all aspects of the personality, but you're looking at it from the dynamic point of view, the economic point of view, the topographical and structural point of view, the genetic point of view, and the adaptive point of view. To this day, I don't know of anything better than that. Really, that's the truth. So in any case, as I told you, this took off like a rocket. And then profiles were written for babies. In fact, Freud, which is one of the co-authors in this paper, wrote the baby profile. An adolescent profile was written by a very distinguished psychoanalyst in London. In fact, he was a Canadian, but he became a British subject and never moved out of England, by the name of Moses Laufer. Laufer ran the Brain Center. I think they changed the name later, but when I was there, it was called the Brain Center, which again was an institution like this one, whose non-profit organization, with a large of people involved on it, including me, that what it did was to treat adolescents. That's all it did. And it was financed from some organization in Holland, of all places, so the activities were taking place in London. So he wrote the adolescent profile. And then there was, so that you see the history of it and the value of it, a man by the name of Thomas Freeman. He's still around. He's Scottish, and he wrote profiles for the psychotic personality, about this type of metapsychological assessment of this kind of metapsychological assessment of psychotic people. And that's what he did. He's a very distinguished analyst. He's very old now, but he's still very active. And he devoted his life to looking at psychotic disorders, and so he wrote one. So as you see, they have profiles for nearly every activity. In any case, for all of these profiles, except this adult profile, as you remember, the important issue and the central issue in all of them was developmental consideration. You were looking at something that was developing, and it was different this day from a year from now and from 3 years from now, and it depended on what age the child was at the point that you saw her, until he saw her or him. But depending on how long was adulthood, at least the age around which you are expected to become an adult, if we ever do, you had a very long process of development, and you could not take out your eyes of that horse that is constantly moving from one phase to the next, be that libidinal phases, oral, anal, phallic, prolatency, adolescence, the various phases of adolescence and so on, or from the ego that is developing and acquiring more power and more cognitive ability and developing more of an integrative and synthetic function and so on. Here is different. All of that is done, is gone. It is not that we don't develop anymore when we become adult. But we don't develop anymore in the way children develop in order to become adults. That's done. And once you get to the end of that, process, that's it. Whatever you accomplish is what you have become. And that will be the expression of your genes, your environmental experiences, all kind of vicissitudes that have an influence in development. So if you were assessing people in that age group, whatever you saw, you have to assess against, is that where he ought to be, given his age? So if you saw, I don't know, if a latency child, one thing you ask is, did he resolve his difficult conflict? And how? Or did he not solve it in a successful manner, and he's now symptomatic and carried that onward in his development and things, so that you were always thinking developmentally. Once you get to the adult, that's gone. He should have arrived to certain stations. Yeah? And if he didn't, then what you do is compare that station, which is the highest station that can be reached in human emotional development and maturity, with wherever it was that he remained behind. And you have to do what they do now at the airport, examine the luggage that he comes with to see what it is that he brought, when he's taking the flight into adulthood, or has already taken that flight. So that's a significant difference. The assessment, the metapsychological assessment for all ages, was made on the basis of developmental considerations. So that means that the individual is examined for his position on the progressive sequences relevant to drive development, ego development, superego development, object relationship development, the internal structuralization and adaptation to the environment. Pathology is generally evaluated, that sounds like gunshots in the
Sorry.
in the day. So next time,
Sorry.
we don't want to suggest that we see this forever. It's kind of funny how they sound just like a. I told Francis that you remember to disconnect the door, because that is incredibly intrusive when it is in the DVDs. Okay. So pathology is evaluated, as it says here in this paper, in all instances according to its interference with orderly and steady progress in these developmental respects. That's what we have been talking about. And we try to give you a little mini course of psychoanalytic theory so that you know what drive development is, what ego development is, what object relationship looks like, and so on. So it's obviously a condensed short course, but it is enough to give you an overview of it. Now, this basic rationale for all the above changes dramatically with the application of the profile schema to the adult personality. In this instant, assessment is concerned not with an ongoing process, but with a finished product, in which, by implication, the ultimate developmental stages should have been reached. If you develop normally into adulthood, that's what should have happened. Obviously, that's not true in every case or for everyone. And so you are going to measure what is he bringing his luggage to the airport now, or what is it that he didn't accomplish, or what do you see from the past that shouldn't be there anymore because he's now an adult and things of that kind. But you are measuring him against the end of the road, which is where the run, it's like the runaway of the airport. That's the end of the runaway. There is nowhere else to go from there. So the developmental point of view may be upheld only insofar as success or failure to reach this level or to maintain it determines the so-called maturity or immaturity of the adult personality. That will tell you if it reached an adequate and appropriate degree of adult maturity, both emotional, psychological maturity, and a variety of other ways, or if he has not. And if he has not, that's what you assess it as well. What is it that is missing? You do that because that gives you an idea of several things again, which are essential when you take somebody in treatment. What is his prognosis? What is it that he's missing? And can that be repaired? Is that repairable or not? And what is his diagnosis? And what kind of form of treatment are you going to choose, given what you see that he didn't bring up to adulthood, and which is the form of treatment that better will suit somebody in that situation. For the rest, we say here, normality is judged by the quality of functioning. Listen to this. In an adult, normality is judged by the quality of functioning in sex, work, and with sublimations, the pleasure in life derived from it, and by the quality of the individual, object, and community relations. That's how you measure the maturity and the emotional health of an adult. Pathology reveals itself through permanent symptomatology which interferes with any of the above aims, by suffering for internal causes, by the individual's incapacity to relate realistically to his environment, the objects in the environment, or both. So that should highlight for you the difference. There are many similarities. I'm going to pick up some of the difference to underline them from you to help you think that when you are using this for different ages, you have to adapt your mind to that stage of development, if it is a child or adolescent, or where an adult ought to be. Now, in order to be able to do that, you have to know enough about development. And at least we have given you a little bit of it. The rest you have to acquire by getting more training or by doing your own personal reading. It won't get you that far because it's a lot more difficult to learn by oneself than to have teachers. But that's it. Now, let me then move forward a little bit. We have till 6 o'clock, is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me see, what do I want from you? I already talked to you about this, that the profile is a way of thinking, it's not just to fill the sections. Now, we are going to move the first 4 sections, which is a description of the child, the reasons for the referral, the significant environmental influence, all of these first sections, which, as you remember, were descriptive sections. You simply took what they told you. You were not organizing that data, you were collecting data that then you will organize according to these 5 different metapsychological principles. So these are the same. When you get to the assessment of development, the first one, which is section 5 in the profile you had, is the dry development. And within the dry development, you look at both the libido and the aggressive drive. Now, I read you the difference in both these profiles. In the adult, it says, describe the present libidinal position of the patient against the ideal normal position that he should have reached. Ideally, for women, a passive feminine position. I tell you what that means, so before you get offended. And for men, an active masculine one with no more than the normal admixture in terms of bisexuality. At the time of assessment, it is important to determine if the highest level has ever been reached, if it is being maintained, or if it has been abandoned regressively for an earlier one. Where the adult position has not been reached, it is important to assess the quality and quantity of the interferences that were contributed by the previous phases and that made it impossible to reach the end product of adulthood. Now, passive feminine and active masculine means the following. In this context, it doesn't mean that women have to be passive in their jobs or in their daily activities, so that they cannot be very aggressive or cut somebody's throat if they so wish to do. They can do all of that. That's not what passivity means. Passivity here means that in the sexual interaction, they should be willing to receive the man in their vagina. In other words, they should be willing to receive a penis with pleasure and enjoyment as a compliment. You know, it's an anatomical compliment. And that's all it means. Now, within that, she can be as active as she likes and, you know, do whatever she wants in the sexual relationship to her object. But that is an essential component of maturity. Why? Because without that, the species cannot survive. And so it's very wise in terms of adaptation for that to take place, because only women can conceive and procreate. Men can do that, all right? So what is the counterpart of that? Well, men have to have what is called an active masculine position. Does that mean that they are always aggressive and active and pushing? No. It only means that in the sexual act, they should have reached a stage where the utmost pleasure and the utmost communion between them is sexual intercourse. All right? And that's what active masculine means. It is seen in terms of adaptation. Within that, he can do whatever he likes to, you know. But that he must be able to do, otherwise the same will happen. He cannot enjoy penetrating a woman and having whatever it takes to do that. The species will be gone, right? And so that's what it means. It doesn't mean anything else. It doesn't mean that women are passive, that they shouldn't be aggressive, that they couldn't, you know, get into business and cut men's throat into business. It doesn't mean any of that. It only means the sexual position. It's a passive receptive position. For females, it's an active, giving, penetrating position for males. Anything short of that is trouble, obviously. In any case, so that's the difference. You don't look for that in children. You look whether it's in the oral phase or the anal phase or the phallic edible phase, which is preparing you for all of this, but it hasn't taken you there yet, you know. Now you look as well as the libido distribution, and that means the cathexis of the self. How much is in the self, how much goes to the object. And in cathexis of the self, these things are the same, whether the self is cathected, you do that with children, and whether there is sufficient narcissism, primary and secondary, invested in the body, the ego, the superego, to ensure regard for the self, self-esteem, a sense of well-being without leading to an overestimation of the self. All of that is true of children in different degrees according to the age. It's more true of an adolescent than a 3-year-old, obviously. Now, if possible though, consider the regulation of narcissism. Note whether this is brought about through identification, object dependence, magical means, work, and so on. In the adult, some information in relation to the cathexis of the self can be obtained in areas such as patience, personal appearance, how he presents himself, in terms of his, dressing and personal care. Children don't care about that. And what you see is not so much the result of the child's attitude to himself, but it may be more the result of the parents or whoever is the caretaker of the child attitude to the child in terms of dressing and things of that kind. With adults, they are responsible now for their own bodies and their own appearances, and you look at that in a different manner, obviously. So, you examine that very, very closely. So as I told you, you can get some information about that by looking at the patient's personal appearance, his closest, while the child's appearance in this respect reflects the adult's attitude towards him. Now in cathexis of objects, there are some differences, significant differences that you will see between a child or anybody in the process of development and an adult. Children need objects to develop and to protect them and to guide them and to identify with them and to promote growth and to help them control their instincts and to help them get organized, their egos, and to help them get adapted to their societies and their environment and to abide by the rules that are typical for that culture, that family, or that country, or that religion, whatever it is. Adults should have left all of that behind. So you're not looking for that. You are looking for where is he now? What did he bring to the counter at the airport? What is the luggage looks like? As in previous sections, before the cathexis of object, the evaluation should start at the highest level in an adult, i.e., at the level where the objects are considered and treated as partners in their own right. Children don't necessarily do that, not even adolescents do that necessarily, because they still can become children, very oscillate between being children and adults very fast. And so you see both tendencies, take care of me and go away and grown up, Only that it happens within a span of 10 minutes. Well, adults don't have that privilege. Now, so you state the following, and this is totally different from the children. Whether the individual in question has been able to choose his or her sexual partner and how far his object needs are met by that partner. You don't look for that in children, right? Or adolescents. Whether the attitude necessary for motherhood and fatherhood has been achieved and on what level. Now don't misunderstand me. Not everybody has to get married, or not everybody has to have children and become a father or a mother. That's not so. But it is different if that is a free will decision that you have reached for whatever reason you have reached it, than if that is enforced on you by the luggage that you carry. That's different. One is free will, the other one is not. The other one is overdetermined by all the conflicts that are in fact interfering with what perhaps is what you want, but can do it. You see the difference? So it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to be thinking, I want to be a mother, I want to be a father. Not necessarily, not even I want to be married. But there are many people that decide not to do that. Religious people, for example, that, make votes of celibacy, though, as you see, a percentage of them can keep it, But that's human nature. There will always be a percentage of people, wherever they are, that are going to misbehave, whether it is a priest or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anybody else, Unfortunately, in their case, of course, that has particularly detrimental elements to it and discouraging elements to it. But some people do that. I say, I don't want to do that. I want to go into a monastery, or I want to be a nun, or I want to be a missionary in Africa, or in Alaska, or wherever it is. There are all kinds of choices that people can make. If they are made freely, that's okay. If they are made because that's the only choice you can make, and the other alternative choices that are simply doors that are closed to you and you can open them, then that's a problem, and that's what you're looking for. What part, whether and how far the infantile Oedipal relationship have been outgrown or still dominates the picture. That's very important. You remember when we talk about the phallic Oedipal phase, we were saying that that is a central organizer of the personality, and what comes out of that will determine the future of essentially everybody. If you have resolved your Oedipus complex in a satisfactory manner, then you are ready to move to a community of peers. You remember we were talking of the small child that is, the mother says, I'm going to the grocery, you say, I'm going with you, I'm going to stay with Peter. Once he's 5, 6, or 7, the mother says the same, say, well, you go, I go riding with the bicycle with Pete. You see, he moved away from the mother. The attachment had become neutralized, it's not essential to his survival, his dependency is now somehow diminished so that he can move away more and more from her and son. The same is true in adolescence when he will move, obviously, to a community of peers, but with a completely different attitude. In latency, as we told you, children still live by the norms of the family. In adolescence, they frequently throw the norms of the family out of the window and take the norms of the group. And so it's a completely different moving away from home, and some of them have to do it in very dramatic ways, which are very detrimental to them and very anxiety-provoking for the families. Right? So you are looking at all of these things. Obviously, in order to treat your sexual objects, whether you are a woman or a man, as a sexual partner, and as a sexual object on its own right, with no characteristics brought from your mother or your father or expectations brought. It's so that it is a partner in life, not only a sexual partner, but a partner in life. And that means that you don't expect them to be a mother or to be a father, or sometimes to be a husband, but at other times to be a brother or a sister. They have to be husbands and wives. If you have not resolved your Oedipus complex appropriately, that's the luggage that you will be carrying. When you open the bag at the airport, which is the end of development, you will see, oh, there's a lot of things that don't belong here, and are going to interfere with his ability to relate to an object in an appropriate, emotionally mature, significant manner of value for both of them. Obviously, the shorter he or she is, or all of that, the more trouble they are going to be in the marriage, and possibly catastrophic trouble. Now, so you want to know whether he had really mastered his infantile Oedipal relationship, and whether that still dominates the picture. In other words, you are looking for a husband that is really a father, and have the expectations of having an acquired father, only that it becomes a kind of quasi-incestuous relationship. What part is played, this is the other thing you look at, by other human relationships, such as friendships, alliance to groups, or their avoidance, working relationships, and so on. That's what adults do, and that's what you look at. What is the quality of the relationship in the activities that adults have to engage with ego-wise? And that's other human beings. Can they relate to other human beings? How do they treat them? Are these people on their own right? Do you respect their rights? Or do you think they are there for you to kick them in the butts, or to use them and abuse them and things of that kind? You may not be thinking of this rationally, logically or consciously. You might not be saying, oh, I want to kick them in the butt. That's not what we are saying. What we are saying is you look at how they treat these subjects. And whether they mean or don't mean consciously to do that, you look at their behavior. And if they are doing that, you say they are treating objects in a way that is not appropriate for an adult male or an adult female, looking for a partner or looking for a friend, or treating or relating to co-workers. All right? Now, above all, what part is played on the one hand by heterosexual object affexes and on the other hand by homosexual object affexes? And again, this can create a lot of trouble when it is conflictual, all right? And I don't want to enter in a discussion of whether these two lines of development are normal or abnormal. I leave that to your judgment. But obviously, in a typical society, certain things are going to create problems of a certain type, and that's why people talk about getting out of the closet, which means you were hiding for some reason, right? Not necessarily because that's bad in itself, but because your society doesn't approve of it. Whatever it may be, it creates conflicts between you and the social group. Whether too much libido is withdrawn from the real object world and sexual satisfaction thought in masturbation, accompanied by usually object-directed fantasies. Indeed, there are people who, though they are married, they enjoy more masturbation than sexual intercourse with their sexual partners, or have a very active sexual life that obviously has no place in an adult, mature, emotional human relationship. They should enjoy each other, As you will know, that is frequently not the case. And some of you have patients that are perhaps paradigms of this problem. Now, clearly, that's done because of conflicts. Clearly, they are carrying baggage that doesn't allow them, for whatever reasons it is, to really feel comfortable and secure in having sexual relationship with an object that must be treated not only with love, but with respect and admiration and love, yeah. And some of these people can do that. Different ways, for different reasons. So you are looking at all of that. That's what tells you whether an adult is mature, is healthy, is emotionally ready to face life and to join somebody in a partnership. Now, the other point you look at is whether and how deeply the individual is attached to objects which serve as substitutes for or extension of ties with other human beings, such as animals, property, money, and things of that kind. There are people that have a distinct preference for animals. They don't want anything to do with human beings in extreme cases. Doesn't mean to say that you can have animals and be mature. That's not what it means. It means a substitution of the one for the other. And in the hierarchy of relevance, these animals, property, money, whatever it may be, pieces of art, different people that have different things, become a substitute for an adult mature relationship to another human being. That obviously is not really very good and means that there is a lot of trouble, and it's already closing these people in. It's not allowing them to fulfill themselves and the capacities that they have as human beings because they can exercise and they are restricted to relate to animals or whatever it may be. So that, as you see, is things that you don't look for in children as closely because they haven't reached the acme of development. And in adults, though, yeah, it is, because if any of these things is in between them and the end of that run, then they are having problems. Total personality to a specific life situations, the man takes an opportunities. Here, there are yet when you get to the reaction of the total personality to a specific life situations, the man takes an opportunities. Here, there are, I give you some examples. It's no different. You do the same. Only that.
Move your hand.
Only that here. It's an act. It's very difficult for me to think about 3 times at the same time. They say that can happen in your unconscious, but you have all right. Jeez.
It's mean.
All right. So what you look here is not different, but you are looking at things that are more appropriate for adult people than for children. For example, the patient's attitude to his sex life, or for that matter, the sex life of other people. His success or failure at work or in work. Attitude to social and community responsibilities. Children don't have too many of those, or they have some. But adults do. They have to fit into their communities and they have social responsibilities. We all do if we belong into a civilized, organized society, as indeed we do. His disturbed or undisturbed capacity for enjoying companionship, social relationships, and the ordinary pleasures of life. His vulnerability and ability or failure to withstand disappointments, losses, misfortunes, fateful events, environmental changes of all kinds, and so on. So we are doing the same, but instead of looking at entering to nursery school or the birth of a sibling, you look at things that are typical for adults, that adults have to engage in, and you see how successful they are in doing that. Then you go to the next session, or section, which is, by now we are in the assessment of fixation points and regression. And this, you assess in exactly the same way that you deal with children, only that what you expect to find is different. If it were to be normal, I have, traversed in a successful manner most of the development. But in reality, most human beings haven't done that. They have done well enough to behave normally and to be normal. But if you look close, you will find certain things. Are they significant in terms of their ability to function and to enjoy life and to be a normal human being? No. And consequently, these are like variations of normality. You say, yeah, there is a little thing there, but it doesn't seem to interfere too much. So you don't split hairs with these things. As long as they are doing all of these other, criteria, all these other criteria that we mentioned is being done reasonably well, then you are happy. So obviously you look at the individual, the type of object relationship, the type of activity that is involved in that, and how that manifests through the ego interest, what they, collect, or who people they prefer, and things of that kind. Now, as you know, one way we look at that, at the fixations and regressions, is by looking at what it is that they do, what their ego interests are. If you have fixation at certain points, your ego interests tend to be focused in certain areas or in certain activities. They may be highly sublimated, but they are still clear pointers in that direction. Now, in an adult, then these are other factors that you pay some attention to, but they are common and they are very telling in terms of the fixation point. Generally speaking, they are not as observable or as important for children because they don't think this way. But for example, unrealistic concern for health, your own, and you notice what it says, unrealistic concern for health. Safety, your own or that of your partners or your children. Safety of the marital partner, children, parents or siblings show special difficulty of coping with your death wishes in an adult. Fear of medicine, food fads, and so on point to defense against oral fantasies, shyness to defenses against exhibitionism, and things of that kind. Now, all of that is true in children, but it may not be as visible, and it may be more legitimate, you know. Because after all, a young child, the mother goes on a vacation, he's 3 or 4, he doesn't understand where the mother went or whether she's going to come or not, you know. So his anxiety about where is she going to come, is she dead, in terms, dead in inverted commas, you know, they don't understand this that you and I do, but in whichever way, it's obviously something bad, mother isn't there. Well, obviously an adult has grown out of all of that, but still, he may have all of these unrealistic concerns. And so they become very significant, you know? And so you pay a special attention to that particular set of behaviors. Now, when you get to the section on assessment of conflicts, there are not many differences, you know. Most of them, you examine the same things. You look at whether there are external conflicts, whether the conflicts are internalized, or what is the nature, quantity and quality of internal conflicts. That will influence tremendously how the adult looks and behaves and what is capable of or not. There is one difference, and it is the following. External conflicts are normal in children. They are part of normal development for many, many years. External conflicts are not normal in adults. In other words, in the adult, direct clashes between it and external demands occur only where ego and superego development are defective. Otherwise, by then, he would have put all of that in its place. He knows what can be done with his aggression and what cannot, and what can be done with his sexual impulses and what cannot be done, and all of that. So, you don't expect external conflicts in adults. They don't have the right to it. Children do. They are born with their instincts. They are not born with any controls of their instincts or any education as to what is good or bad, what can be done or not. But an adult has gone through a long process that you have taught him all of that, and by means of introjecting into his ego and his superego, you know, the adequate responses, he should be able to manage all of these things within reason. So, conflicts between the total personality and the environment, like refusal to adapt to the environment, creative attempts to modify the environment, can occur at any stage up to adolescence. And some of them are not pathogenic. Not all of them are pathogenic, but you have to pay attention to them. But essentially, you know, there are no external conflicts. When you see external conflicts in adults, you have to conclude two things. Either the process of internalization and introjection that goes to build the superego structure, create superego ideals and ego ideals, have failed for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have the right object for identification, or in fact have the wrong objects for identification, which offer the wrong kind of behaviors to identify with and exercise later on as adults. Or that means a fault in the structure of the personality. In fact, it means a fault in the structure of the ego and the superego. And that's not easily remediable, okay? If it never got introjected, that is a real lack, you know. It's like the architect forgetting to put iron in the roof. I mean, that roof is not reliable, you know. The other case is when they are using externalization, and it looks as if, man, okay, that's you people do, and so on. Then it looks at times that the conflict is with the external world and not an internalized one. But usually you can smell that, and you know, because the rest of the personality doesn't tally with that. You know, he has a good superego, he has a conscience, he behaves in a reasonable fashion, so he has selected something very specific to say, no, that's out there. Okay, in the internalized conflicts, it's the same, but this is what we underline in this particular paper. In the fully structured, mature adult, disharmonies between instinctual wishes and external demands are mediated via ego and superego and appear as internalized conflicts. They are already internalized, it's not in the process of internalization. As I say here, occasionally such conflicts are externalized and appear in the guise of conflict with environment, but that is an externalization. The internal conflicts are the same, and it's between insufficiently fused or incompatible representatives such as unsolved ambivalence, activity versus passivity, masculinity versus femininity. All of these conflicts are there to some degree, but they should have been solved in a reasonable fashion so that it makes the ego able to perform at the level that we were describing earlier, both in object relationship at work, in sexual activities, in leisure activities, in your relationship to other human beings and so on. Obviously, when this has not happened through development, again, when you open your luggage, they will say, oh, he's carrying things he shouldn't be carrying at this particular point in time. Now, finally, we are going, and this is a long set of differences. It's the one of assessment of some general characteristics. And we are here with a bearing on the need for analytic therapy and the ability to profit from it. Now, the ones we described for children apply here too, if you remember what they were. Frustration tolerance, the capacity to tolerate anxiety, the capacity to accept substitutes, and what we call progressive versus development. It is in the group of progressive versus regressive developmental forces. What is the balance of that? All of that was very useful in children because it tells you what resources they have to cope with development. Now, these people have finished development. So if they had the resources, they would have done well, assuming that neurotic conflicts and other type of problems didn't intervene. If they were not able to resolve some of these problems, all of the scars of these are going to show in the adult personality as lacks in behavior, in symptom formation, in the ability to relate to other human beings, in the capacity to work, and the rest of it. So, as regards the need for internal change, the following points may be considered relevant. Whether the patient's id and ego agencies have been separated off from each other too completely by excessive use of repression, and whether better communication needs to be established between them. In fact, what you're looking is as the result of all the developmental process, and maybe where the damage is. There was so much repression that there is not a working collaboration between the ego and the id, but in fact, there is an enormous distance in between the two of them. That may show as a result of all these developmental processes not going as well as they could, and you need to pay attention to this in an adult. Another point, whether the ego's sphere of influence has been restricted unduly by the defenses and needs to be enlarged. As I told you, some defenses are not very good and limit your ego abilities and capacity, restrict you tremendously. And that's what you're looking at. Is that what happened to this fellow? Is that what happened? Then you know where to look, what task you have in front of you. It probably gives you some ideas, given the defense that he uses or whatever it is, where the conflict came from. You may have some idea what component phase and what component incident and all of that. Whether ego mastery over the impulses is weakened for other than defensive reasons. For example, ego defects, a psychotic core, which is a genetic problem, and whether improvement will depend in the first instance on the strengthening effect that therapy has on the ego resources. That can sometimes be done. Sometimes you have hit rock bottom. You can go past the genes, you know, I mean, that's rock bottom. Okay. Whether the superego structure is archaic and through analysis of its sources needs to be replaced by a more mature one. We saw in children and adolescents the process of developing a superego and whether it was becoming too punitive or reasonably balancing given aims and goals and directions and ideals, and at the same time setting limits and restricting behavior and helping to control your impulses. Here you are looking at the end product, and you say then whether this structure that should be well balanced for normal functioning is not, and may show these characteristics of being archaic or primitive. And if you look at the analysis of its sources, you may well think that it needs to be replaced by a more benign one or a more mature one, and whether you can do that. If you understand what the sources were and whether this was a result of neurotic conflicts, they can be changed. Okay? Okay. Whether the libidina and aggressive energies or only libido or aggression are bound up in context-affected conflicts and symptom formation and need to be released for constructive use. Again, you're looking at the end product. Where did he get to with these things? Are they solved, or he's still having this kind of problem, and that's what you are looking at and you have to solve. Now, the following characteristics, attitude and circumstances seem to us of relevance to either positive or negative reaction to analytic therapy. And now you are assessing people for analytic treatment. Right? By extension, obviously you can use this for psychotherapy and get a better idea of what it is. But this is aiming at an ideal. Usually in psychotherapy you are much more restricted in your goals. You are a lot more ambitious when you have a patient analysis, you know, frequently, 4 or 5 times a week, and you will see him or her for years. And all of these assessments will give you a good idea of how far can you go, how much can they accomplish, and so on. And obviously your decision, if you think that they will move from here to here, you say it's not worth it, you know. It's not going to accomplish much. But if you think it's going to go from here to here, you say, yeah, that's a good investment of your time. It's a good investment of the patient's time, effort, and money, you know. So on the positive side, whether there is insight into the detrimental nature of the pathology, including the desire to be cured. With children, you don't ask for that. Children don't want to be cured. In fact, they frequently have no awareness of being ill. The symptoms are maybe a nuisance to the environment, but not to them. They frequently enjoy the symptoms. That's not so with an adult. If you have an adult who enjoys the symptoms, it's not treatable. You know. So whether there is insight into the detrimental nature of the pathology, including the desire to be cured, whether there is ability for self-observation, self-criticism, and capacity to think and verbalize. The more people can look inside, be self-critical, and put up with it, and self-observe, the better off they are. If on top of that they have the capacity to think and verbalize elegantly, that's a great asset, you know. Obviously, if you refuse to look inside, and if you refuse to use self-criticism and accept constructive criticism, you're in trouble, because it's very difficult to move you from where you are. You will close the door, you know, instead of peeping in and saying, well, maybe that's true, let me look. Whether there is ability, whether the patient has a sufficiently high level of object relationship and a sufficient quantity of free object libido to establish a meaningful transparent relationship to the analyst, and whether this relationship will serve also as a treatment alliance and withstand all the ups and downs of the resistances. Analysis is not easy. Whoever thinks that analysis is a bed of roses is wrong. It's painful, it's difficult, very rewarding, it changes you for life if it is successful, which more frequently are not it is, at least in significant ways and regards. It's not perfect, no, they are not perfect human beings, they are not perfect analysts, they are not perfect patients. But it makes an enormous difference. So if you can do that, if you have enough to cassette the analyst and develop a transference, then obviously your chances are much better. Again, you look at whether there is enough frustration tolerance, but we already looked at that before. Where there is enough tension tolerance, as anxiety tolerance, to cope with the additional anxiety, likely to be released by exposing conflicts and weakening defenses during the analytic process. That's when analysis is painful. It makes you anxious and frightened sometimes, you know, that you may not have what it takes, that you may go bananas, that you will be more harm than help, and all of these are, of course, put very efficiently at the service of resistances. Whether the patient has on previous occasion shown the ability to persevere in the face of difficulties. I'm getting there. Whether there are past or present areas of established sublimation which attest to the patient's capacity to displace and neutralize energy and to accept substitute satisfaction, that we deal with the children. Whether there is flexibility of libido as contrasted with uneasiness. Whether there is a positive, optimistic general outlook on life as contrasted with a crippling pessimism. And that's the equivalent of the progressive versus regressive developmental forces. You know. On the negative side, there are only three, so we're about to finish. Whether there is dangerously low tolerance for frustration and anxiety coupled with the unwillingness to renounce secondary gains of the pathology. Enormous secondary gains in pathology. Whether the patient pathology is part of a pathological family of professional setting and cannot be altered without causing major upheavals and break-up in the external life situation. Whether there are extreme self-punishing, self-destructive and masochistic attitudes that are satisfied through the pathology and oppose improvements, i.e. which cause negative therapeutic reactions. That's against you. It's not that it's unmanageable, but it certainly is not helping you, and it's not helping the patient. You know, it becomes a major resistance. So these were the things that the major difference between one and the other. And you see, all it does is the same thing. And you will have to have the knowledge that we acquire in looking at children and development, Because in order to understand what we see here, we need to know what happened in the history of that fellow. But what we look at is where should be he or she now, once he got to the end of the run, of development. And then you start to look back to try and understand what it is, and that's what I had for you today, okay?